My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting a household name in the procurement technology industry, one of the real pioneers and staples in the space. He brings a great body of experience of nearly 30 years, most notably back in 2004. After 9 years as principal at Kearney, he co-founded the Smart Cube, which was recently acquired as part of the WNS technology portfolio. Additionally, today's guest has authored the book named Risk and Your Supply Chain, Preparing for the Next Global Crisis. Omer Abdullah. Omer, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Sam. I appreciate those very kind words, and I'm excited to be here for this conversation.
We're excited to have you as well. I want to start with a question that we ask a lot of our guests. What exactly does this space of sourcing and procurement mean to you?
So it's a good question. It's something that's evolved for me. You know, I've been playing in the space now for, going on 30 years plus. And I think what it means has really evolved over time. You know, in the early days, we would look at it as how to get cost out of an organization. But I think that message and that meaning has evolved very materially to where procurement and sourcing has a much bigger role to play in an organization and delivers a wider range of values. Now, I appreciate that varies according to the organization you're in or the industry you might play in, et cetera. But I really think procurement is in probably the best position it's ever been in terms of its scope, its focus, and the sheer impact it can have in an organization. So today, I think procurement and sourcing is really about true value creation, where value is defined as more than simply unit cost. It's about a greater shareholder impact if you want to broaden it out to that level.
And I think it's so important to talk about value, especially in today's era of procurement. Speaking of the space, the industry, the one that you probably love and have been in for so long, what made you decide to work in procurement? Did you choose the role or did it choose you?
Gosh, so I started doing sourcing in the early 90s, but not knowing what specifically, there wasn't a term for it that we were using, but buying laptops for the first company I ever worked for. So that was kind of part of my role, part of my multiple faceted responsibilities that I had there. And then in management consulting, doing strategic sourcing and procurement transformation work and building on it from there. And when we started the Smart Cube, we saw an opportunity to really help the procurement practitioner with better insight, better data, being able to make just fundamentally better decisions. And so that became an area that I felt, this is an area that we can not only build a business around, but really, frankly, help drive some real value. And as you know, if you can drive real value, the business will follow, right? And so that's kind of what my experiences led me towards procurement and sourcing, and why we've sort of so strongly focused in the space over the last 20 years or so within the Smart Cube.
There's a lot of value to be delivered from the role in the industry as well. And at the Smart Cube, if we double click on what you guys are doing, your, I think, LinkedIn site quotes, your solution provides high-performing intelligence that answers critical business questions for leading companies around the world. I love that statement. What is high-performing intelligence in 2023 and in the scope of the Smart Cube?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what high-performing intelligence is not. It is not just simply data, right? We don't have a problem with data today. We have no problem with data. We have tons of information, tons of data, qualitative, quantitative, and it's just exploded, frankly. And frankly, it's just it's growing even exponentially as we go forward. And accessing it is becoming easier and easier, right? So, so back to give you to date myself a little bit. Back in 1995, when I was a management consultant, the internet was the new thing, and I remember getting a subscription to CompuServe, an AOL. And that made me special because I had access to data that wasn't readily available to a lot of other people. Today it means nothing, right? It's table stakes. Everybody has that. And so, so it's not just about data. What it's really about is converting that data into something meaningful. So high performing intelligence is, if I could maybe use a specific term, it's insight. It's, okay, what do I do? What is the outcome I'm looking for? And how does this information translate and tell me what to do and when to do it and how to? So, that's been our prime focus. And if you look at the Smart Cube, our overarching vision when it comes to our procurement business is we want to make procurement the number one value creator in the organization. That's our overarching mission. That's our goal. How do you do that? Well, you deliver better insight and intelligence. You help them become more insight-led. So high-performing intelligence is helping the practitioner becoming insight-led, giving them just the right information at the right time in the right places so that they can move their category, their function, their department, their business, their activity forward and achieve the outcome they're looking for. High-performing intelligence enables you to achieve better outcomes.
Where do you think that procurement teams are lacking intelligence? Obviously, when they don't have the Smart Cube, that's number one. But beyond that, with all seriousness, when you come into procurement organizations that are looking for more high-performing intelligence, those insights, which they need to become a value leader in the business, where do you see that they're currently lacking insights?
I think so the issue is typically, I'd say, in the I'll use the term in the conversion of that data. So in other words, you'll go into a lot of procurement organizations, and so whether it's a new organization or whether it's a relatively mature one, and what you end up seeing in those situations is they've made a bunch of subscription choices, they're accessing data from various sources, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that is well and good. What they're lacking and what they're missing is fundamentally the ability to take that data and convert it into real action. Oh, I paid for this subscription. I bought this database, but it's not really being fit for purpose, right? It's not really done what it's supposed to do. And to me, that conversion aspect is missing. And that's kind of where we're trying to focus is what we're saying is, look, it's not just about fundamentally syndicated data. It's about converting that data into meaningful insight. And so typically that's what's missing. It's not about, folks are smart. They know their categories. They know their industries. But what they don't have is the requisite types of intelligence that then they can convert into better actions and outcomes. So to me, it's that conversion, if you see what I mean, that's what's missing. And that's where we want to really come in and help you. Just make better decisions, understand things better, have a better conversation with your internal customer. If you're able to do that, your customer wants to spend more time with you, whether it's in a procurement context, whether it's marketing or legal or HR or frankly, chemicals or packaging or whoever else it might be that you're working with, the contract manufacturing team, et cetera. You're just having better conversations. So that's where where I think the issue is and where we want to play.
I think that you hit on something very interesting during your response to that question, which is about maturity in businesses, right? Because obviously there's a broad range of maturity, and I want to double click on that and talk a little bit more about application of ProcureTech in procurement organizations, because there's leading and digitally native teams, but there's also, the other side of that as well. And there's a lot of pioneering solutions out there in the buzzing topic of AI, especially generative AI. And I want to know, Omer, do you prescribe to the hype?
So let me answer that in maybe a couple of ways. So first off, I think so. I will say AI. I think is super exciting. I think generative AI is pretty incredible, right? Particularly if I go back to my CompuServe days, right? My AOL.com days. It's actually incredible.
Imagine if you were the only guy with a subscription to ChatGPT, right? I mean,
oh my goodness, yeah, it would be a whole different world. But
right.
Here's the thing: it's super exciting. There's no question we are overhyped on AI. There's absolutely no question whatsoever. And I'll have multiple conversations with clients and organizations who are looking at the space, and they'll go through and they'll speak to 10 organizations that are offering AI and generative AI related applications to procurement offerings. And
right.
each and every single one of them will come back and say, okay, the hype is well beyond what the practical reality is, right? We got to figure out where the right thing is. So that's kind of the situation today. That being said, what I will say is I think it has incredible potential. It's not something you could ignore. I think it's going to fundamentally transform the way work is done, right? Not only for procurement, but frankly for folks offering it. So I'll tell you from a SmartQ perspective, the way we do research in 5 years and 10 years is going to be
right,
materially, foundationally different from the way we do it today, right? It's already today how we're doing it. We're already integrating AI and GenAI and tools into what we do. It's foundationally different from what it was 5 years ago. And so it's going to keep evolving. For the procurement practitioner, I think there's incredible opportunity. Fundamentally, I think it's opportunity, but I think it comes with some risk depending on where you sit as well. In that, I think it's going to transform the procurement function. I think the traditional models of how we think about not only the procurement organization, what you own and what you don't own, whether you resource internally or externally, or you leverage technology to do it, is going to fundamentally transform. And I think the work that we do on a day-to-day basis and the work that a procurement practitioner does is going to fundamentally transform. I think some roles are going to get accelerated. Some are going to get much more sophisticated, and some are just going to get taken away. And things that we don't, I think we don't even fully understand yet.
Well, I'm interested there. What roles do you believe will be most greatly impacted by the emerging technologies, and especially AI?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think it goes without saying, we're already seeing transactional activity getting automated. We're seeing, some of the more routine things, even if it's not purely transactional, but some of the more routine activities getting processized. I think, if you look at traditional activities like I'll just use a broad term, sourcing execution, right? RFX management.
The raising of a PO and kind of the issuing of a sourcing event.
I think that's going to get, well and truly automated. I'm even taking a step earlier where you're running an RFX activity. Right?
Gotcha.
And if you look at the players that are there today, I mean, there's no shortage of tools in that area. But there's a lot of steps in there that the the sourcing practitioner, the category lead, actually does the work, right? They do a lot of the analysis that goes into that. They do a lot of the thinking activity that goes into that. I think there's a chunk of that activity that's going to get picked up by generative AI and related tools, right? What's happening with the supplier? Who are the suppliers? Pre-qualifying those suppliers. It's not going to take away 100% of the work, but it's going to take away probably 70, 80% of that work. And then what you're left with is doing some real thinking, okay? Is this supplier truly fit for purpose? And that's not as simple as just going off of a checklist and saying, yep, they meet this criteria, they meet this criteria, this criteria. It's about understanding the supplier, understanding where they're trying to go with their business. How does that fit in with what I'm trying to do? And if I'm a large material buyer in that space, what does that mean in terms of how it fits in with my strategy and my category strategy in particular? How do I line up that partnership? Is there a gain share model that we need to put in place? What do I expect from an innovation point of view? Tech will not take that thinking over. But if you think about that, that's like higher order today, right? There's still a bunch of work that I've got to do, even beyond the technology of automating the process of running an RFX, right?
Right.
But I think what Gen AI is doing is there's the process element, and it's going to make that super simple and user-friendly, right? There's a lot of activity going on there. But it's now encroaching on the next level of analysis that a practitioner would do, and taking a lot of that over. And what that means is my job used to be the analysis and the pure thinking, if I can put it that way. A lot of this analysis is going to get taken over, and now I'm left with that. So my skill set has to keep moving up the value chain if you want to think about it that way. I think that's and again, who knows in 10 years, what is the procurement organization going to look like? I'm not sure. We have this thing, and this is not specific to procurement. Sorry, I'm giving you a bit of a long answer here. But,
no, it's great.
But this is not specific to procurement, but we tend to think if we own a function, we think, more people equals more control, more power. I think we have to flip that paradigm. I don't think in 10 years from now, I think certainly influence and control is an important aspect for a CPO. But what is that org going to look like? It's not going to be driven by number of people, right? I might have 5 people, 10 people in my team, but I have vastly greater influence than somebody who's got 100 folks in their team in another organization. So we're just shifting these paradigms. We're going to turn things on their head. And I think it's an exciting time, but it's a time where practitioners need to think hard about what are my current skill sets, and am I equipped for the future of where this is going?
If we maybe, continue on the road of that paradigm shift then to more resource efficiency, right, within teams, starting to look at opportunities in which technology can be able to really, how would I say, not replace heads, but make processes far more efficient and shift the way a procurement team of tomorrow looks. What does that mean for us as technology vendors? What is the biggest shift that we need to do as vendors within this space?
So I think for us, it's a couple of things. One is when we're creating solutions, I'm going to use the term solutions as opposed to just procurement technology. I think tech is part and parcel, but I think there's a human aspect that we have to think about as well, right? Pure tech will not solve all the problems that there are. But I think what we have to do is look at it from the standpoint of the procurement practitioner, not only today, but where they're going to be and the generation that's growing up into that environment, right? We have a generation today who have grown up on, to use the old cliche, Apple and Amazon, right? They don't have time for 7, 8, 9, 10 steps to get through something. It's one click and I'm there, right? It's intuitive interfaces. It's user-friendly. It's tools that do a lot of the groundwork for you and give you not simply data, but they'll give you data if that's what you ask for, right? Because you specifically have an intent to get that. But they give you guidance, advice, thinking, if you will. So I think as vendors, I think what we have to think about is how do we make our solutions more user-friendly in a true consumer, almost like a B2C fashion, right? How do we bring that thinking into the tools that we offer, number one? And then how do we make the ultimate outcomes easier? It's not about process efficiency, it's about process effectiveness, right? And so, I'm gonna do this faster for you, but I'm gonna help you jump 2 or 3 steps ahead and get to a better answer. So I would say think consumer in terms of application interface use. If we can find a way to do it in 1 click versus 5 clicks, right? I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but really provide that interface in a clear way, and then focus on outcomes, right? Focus on the outcome. If we can get to that outcome much more quickly, and by the way, what that might mean is, our solution on its own won't do it, which is our product on its own won't do it, which is why I use the word solution. It might be I've got to layer over X, like a human interface, or I need to build partnership alliances of gaps that I have, right? So ecosystems, to use that well-used phrase in our industry. It's to me, it's those 2 things, right? Focus on outcomes and focus on the user friendliness. Consumerization is a good term that I've heard over time as well.
Do you think though that the B2B user is going to be there? Are they going to meet us at the front door, ready, and not only ready, but demanding a more B2C experience? You talked about this next wave of users, and there's this continued dialogue within this space of procurement technology, right? That ProcureTech is now being bought from the bottom up rather than the top down, right? I would call BS on that in certain aspects. In some organizations, I think that is absolutely the case. Do you believe, though, that the future of procurement technology and buying of solutions is bottom up?
When you say bottom up, you mean from like the
user perspective
in the organization?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Depends on the area, maybe, right? Maybe if we're getting into areas like some aspects of development and training, maybe there's some aspects where that could be bottom up. Look, at the end of the day, the CPO wants control over outcomes. And if you think about it, the right way to get to results in procurement is you start with your corporate strategy, you translate your procurement strategy in the service of the corporate strategy, and then you cascade that down by directs and indirects and then categories and however else you want to kind of think about that, right? And some things are going to be about efficiency and automation, and it's commoditized. So you know what? Maybe you pick that up and you outsource it to a managed services provider, or you implement a technology, or you implement an external catalog and you just run with that. Other things are going to be somewhere in between, right? It's going to be a hybrid in-source, outsource. And then there's other stuff that you never want to let go of, right? You control that, right? So, and so you have to have that overarching narrative and vision, and you have to have, therefore, a roadmap of how you're going to get there. So you need a technology roadmap. So you can't have a grassroots, bottoms-up sort of evolution on this unless it's done. I would say, yeah, some of that can be incidental, like when somebody experiments with something at the grassroots level and then rolls it up and it happens to fit into the overall strategy. Right. But I think, at the end of the day, everything has to fit within a set of frameworks, a clear strategy of what I'm trying to do. And so I think it has to be driven to a certain extent from a top-down perspective, or to a large extent, I would say. But you can allow for sort of experimentation at particular levels, but you got to control that process. Otherwise, you end up with too many technologies. You end up with digital fatigue. That's a huge issue today, right? I have too much. This is another technology. I don't want to learn how to use that, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if somebody creates a piece of technology that is so simple, that's so user intuitive, yet so fundamentally impactful, right? By integrating all sorts of technologies, maybe that's going to bubble its way up. But it's only going to bubble its way up because it fits into the overall strategy. By the way, I'm presupposing here that the CPO has laid out a digital strategy and an integrated and concerted approach to doing this, which I think some organizations have, some organizations have not. But assuming that's there, it's got to be driven in a concerted fashion.
Sure. And I mean, let's be honest, we're in a bubble, right? We sometimes take for granted the widespread understanding of applications and the need for really cutting edge technology. The businesses that we're working with, primarily digitally native, early adopters, ahead of their times in a lot of aspects. Is the average procurement organization, the rest of the 80% below the tip of the iceberg? Are they really ready for the adoption of cutting edge solutions, the generative AI solutions? Or is this really something only for the digitally native, the top performing teams?
So the digitally native folks are definitely ready for that. However, I don't know what percentage of the total universe that is. I would surmise, I don't want to put a number on it. I'd surmise it's not that big, right? So is the vast majority of the procurement community ready for what AI and GenAI is going to unleash on us in the next 5 years to 10 years? I would say almost certainly no, right?
Okay. Can I ask you another question then? So why is our space talking about it so much?
because I think a lot of these technologies are going to yield better outcomes in more efficient ways, in simpler ways, very quickly. So I think it's fine. It's a good tension to have, right? Mm-hmm. And my point is this: there are technologies out there that will leapfrog existing technologies today, right? And they'll get to the answer more quickly in a much more user-friendly way and much more effective way. They'll interpret data, they'll provide better insights, they'll provide better recommendations, and you move forward from there. So that's happening. Procurement is going to get pulled along in that process. Okay, so there is no choice, right? It's not dissimilar to how we've sort of seen globalization over the last, or the move from let me say maybe blue collar to white collar, in the last, whatever it was, 50 years, 70 years, whatever it is. It's going to happen. right? It is happening because that's where the industry is moving. We have an opportunity to try and usher that process in a way that is not as dislocating as the blue to white collar process was. And we know it's created a lot of problems that we're dealing with even today, right? From a broader geopolitical economic perspective. Now, I'm not trying to, procurement is a microcosm. It's a world within this broader world. But, from that perspective, there are some existential questions that we have to sort of deal with. And the most fundamental question is, how do we bring our people along? Which of our people can we bring along? How do we bring them along? And for those who are going to get dislocated, how do we help them, right? What can we do?
How do you think that we don't leave people behind, so to say?
Yeah. So I don't think
that's a big question, right? We don't have time for all of it.
100%. I don't think I don't think we can not leave everyone behind is my point. Like, as in, there will be groups of people who aren't interested. They don't, it's too different of a world and they can't deal with it. I think technology will help because, we're moving to a point where tools are getting simpler and simpler and simpler to use, right? It's like the classic Apple. Apple doesn't have a manual because you don't need a manual. You just open it up and you start using it, right? Now, for some higher order activities, you need a bit of training and you figure out how to do that. But there's going to be a chunk of people who will get dislocated, but there'll be a band of people who are smart, solid folks who are trainable, who are interested in figuring this out, and we'll have to help them upskill. And to me, that's one of the big challenges that we've got in the next 5 to 10 years. How do we help those people upskill using methods that aren't out there today? I think traditional training paradigms are okay, but they don't embed your thinking in here. They don't provide ongoing feedback. They don't provide ongoing change. And I think that's going to be something that to me is like one of the next big things that we've got to help CPOs figure out. So I don't think you can avoid it. Some folks will want to move along, some folks won't. But we'll have to figure out ways to retrain or redeploy, I'd say. Having said that, GenAI is making its way into everything these days, right? It's not just a procurement thing, it's everywhere. And so it's going to be an interesting space. I don't think we have good answers at this point, but we've got to keep our eye on the ball.
Well, I'm happy that you're sharing your insights with us nonetheless. And it's fantastic to speculate as well, right? That's the fun of life sometimes.
That's right.
I'm curious, 20 years plus strong in the procurement technology space. To any other entrepreneurs that are out there listening to you right now, listening to this episode, do you have any words of advice that you could pass on to them? For example, what's one thing that you know now that you wish that you knew at the beginning of your career?
Oh, the list is long, but I'll give you one, and that is it's sort of two sides of the same coin. Nobody has the answer, therefore trust yourself. Okay, and it took me a long time to sort of, you always sort of look, maybe if I read this article, it's going to give me the approach to doing X or Y or Z. And you can learn approaches and techniques and things like that, whatever you sales, marketing, from an operations point of view or from a finance point of view or whatever else it might be. At the end of the day, you have to trust your gut. Should I do this or should I do that? Should I make this decision with this customer or that decision with this customer? And, I think we're inclined to look for advice from other people. I think it's fine to look for advice. At the end of the day, if your gut tells you to do something, that's what you should do. And to me, that's the number one thing for an entrepreneur, right? And because here's the reality, right? When we started the business, I remember speaking to one of my colleagues at my old firm, and I walked him through the idea, and he says, "Yeah, that's never going to fly." Right. And and he gave me sort of these cogent arguments, right? But it didn't sit well in my gut, right? It didn't make sense to me. And intuitively, I felt like it really, there was something here to go do. Had I listened to the rational advice I was given, I wouldn't have done it, right? But I'd say, and that applies just throughout the 20 years of growing an organization and taking it to whatever level you're taking it to. believe in yourself, right? Trust your gut. Trust your gut. Trust your instincts. Go with it. I'm not saying you won't go wrong. You'll go right most of the time, and you'll learn from your mistakes, and you'll go on from there. But it also gives you a lot more confidence. So to me, that's the foundational piece. Nobody has the answer. Trust yourself.
Fantastic. So your advice to entrepreneurs is to not listen to your advice and to trust themselves, pretty much.
Trust themselves. Exactly.
Cool. I like it. I like it. Hey, the craziest thing about being an entrepreneur along the journey is the choice to start being an entrepreneur in the first place, right? And you're an entrepreneur with a capital E, and we're so happy that we've had the opportunity to be able to host you on today's episode. I would love to shift to the last portion of the program where we do a quick fire round with our guests, as we call it, our Kodiak moment. You might remember Kodak, the famous camera brand who had some troubles themselves, in later years battling with digitalization. They had their Kodak moment where they shared a moment in time. I would love to share a moment in time here with you, Omer, which is just a quick fire round. 3 quick questions, 1 word or 1 sentence answers, so that our guests or our listeners can be able to get to know our guest, Omer Abdullah, a little bit more as a person rather than just as a ProcureTech guru. Sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
All right, cool. If you have 1 trip tomorrow, paid, all expenses, a vacation you can take yourself and your family, where are you headed?
Tokyo.
Okay, very nice. And what is the first thing that you're ordering to eat when you get to Tokyo?
Oh my gosh. Sushi at the, I don't know the name of the restaurant, but there's a Netflix documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yes.
It was so good. I don't watch a lot of TV, but it was so good. I watched it 3 times in a week. So it's about passion for what you do and loving what you do. And it's this little, I think it's like a 7-person diner at the bottom of a subway station, but it's Michelin starred from what I understand, and it's amazing. So that's what I would order.
Very cool. Shifting from probably a great TV show, I've seen it myself, to books or podcasts. If you had 1 book or podcast that you could be able to suggest to our listeners, what would it be?
A podcast I listen to every single week is Pivot, which is with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher, that talks about the technology space, but its implications on the world at large, if you will. And they touch on not only AI, but broader aspects of technology and what's happening in the world. So great. Scott Galloway, for those who don't know, he's a professor at NYU School of Marketing. He's a celebrated entrepreneur. He's built multiple businesses. As he says, he's built 12 businesses. He's failed at a bunch of them, but he's been super successful at a bunch of them. Kara Swisher is one of the most preeminent tech analysts in the world today. So that's probably my 1 recommendation. Great podcast from a business point of view.
Great tip. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you being on today's episode of our podcast so much, Omer. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about the Smart Cube, how could they do so?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out the Smart Cube at our website, www.thesmartcube.com. But just drop me an email, and happy to have discussions at any time.
Fantastic. And I'm happy that we had the opportunity to share our discussion today. Thank you again so much for taking the time to be on today's episode. It was fantastic to have you on. Hoping to have you back.
It's been fun. I look forward to it.